Good day, I'm junior researcher Adam Southgate, and today's lecture will be covering the Eldritch spheres Llyncu. I'd appreciate that all hunters please subscribe, as to not miss any future lectures, and also if you enjoy the lecture and find it informative, please like the video and click the bell to ensure you do not miss any future announcements. I would also be very happy to hear your thoughts, views and stories of your own interactions with the monsters of the spheres in the comment area of this video. Also, I'm always ready to answer any questions you may have, and please share these lectures with any hunters you feel would benefit from them. So, to begin, as always, we'll start with our general announcements. Firstly, with the results of the plate skin poll, we were able to cross-reference the data with the general population's rate of infection. Frustratingly, there appears to be no link between entity interaction and rate of infection. However, this does close an avenue of possible causes, narrowing down our search. Following a suggestion by freelance hunter The Slumbering Sanctuary, we have been digging into the possibility that the ailment may be connected to Drai Goch in some way. The plate-like structures do resemble malformed dragon scales, and on top of this, and again as the Slumbering Sanctuary pointed out, the infection only appears to be affecting those of Welsh descent, who all share a single drop of the dragon's blood within their veins. While having a path to follow within our investigation is very helpful, we now have to also contend with the broader implications of what this may mean. We still have no idea why Drai Goch was spirited away, and we don't know, if this is related, if the symptoms are a goal or a byproduct of whatever is being done. We will be redoubling our efforts to discover what has been done to the dragon and where he may have been taken. Secondly, the raid upon one of the Admiral 1234's caches of artifacts that were pilfered from around the world has been a success. This was achieved by drawing his group's attention to 1. With a feint attack using hunters from the Merlin's Eye, while sending the Teenged inhabited hunters to another cache across the country. While it is a win that we were able to secure a sizable amount of these objects, what's more worrying is the size and organization of the group. What at first appeared as a local problem has in fact been revealed to be an international one. Now, whether the group has teams established across the world or they simply send them from a centralized location, we do not know. The group appears to have a mission statement similar to our own, however more focused upon objects that have been affected by the spheres than the entities breaching from the spheres. While at first glance this seems unobtrusive, there are some key points that bring us into conflict. Firstly, their belief that their organization is the only one that can safely contain these artifacts. This statement is called into question by their propensity to utilize these dangerous relics, and much of the time, multiples at the same time. The Order's view on such things is that it is not an ideal strategy, though can be overlooked in times of crisis. The problem is that use of such things is literally addictive, in that the heightened senses, strength, speed, etc. releases dopamine into the body, and after enough time, this can cause severe issues. Secondly, the breaking of the UN's discrete charter, which, as all hunters know, states that no person can hunt outside their local nation's territory without permission. This was established specifically to protect groups like the Order of Merlin that, due to being smaller and less well-funded, would not be able to stop a group such as the English KSG from simply moving in. As stated, the Admiral 1234's group fly in the face of the discrete charter, acting as an international organization without local permissions. Finally, while they did attempt to walk back their threat to raid the Order, it does appear from our contact with other organizations across the world that this is something they do rather regularly. This is an intolerable imposition and cannot be allowed to continue. The problem is that due to their enhanced state, because of the artifacts they carry, they are extremely difficult to take down, never mind capture. Before we begin today's topic proper, a quick recap on the MMB is in order, as it does have a relation with what we are going to be discussing. The MMB, or Mind Mimic Box, is a piece of hunter's equipment made from a wisp crystal, the central core of a fey wisp. These crystals have some intriguing properties due to both their malleability and their ability to connect with another's mind. With extensive modifications, these crystals can be transformed into blank MMBs, which, with a single touch by a human, can transform into a perfect replica of that individual's mind. This is meant in a literal sense, as the crystal will warp both to physically resemble the person's brain, but also contain an exact copy of their consciousness. This artificial mind is fully aware with all the memories and emotions of the user, which obviously opens up some ethical dilemmas. From the MMB's perspective, it is you, but has suddenly lost all bodily sensations such as sight, sound and smell, existing within a black void. While it's awful when the MMB knows exactly what it is because the user knew what it was before linking with it, it would be so much worse if the user did not know what the MMB was for before linking to it. MMBs draw any mental changes that would happen to the user onto themselves, thus defending the user from the effects of trauma, but also bringing those effects down onto themselves. This is involuntary from the MMB's perspective, it simply happens to them, but sadly the only known alternative to MMBs that we know of is pacts like the Celtic Knot, which by their nature forces you into fealty with an entity. This, for obvious reasons, is best avoided. The only kindness we can offer to these MMBs is the delinking process, the literal smashing of the crystal. The Eldritch Sphere's Llyncu is a difficult concept to hammer down. It is not truly an entity in its own right, and instead the leftover effect of an entity long since destroyed via unknown means. Whatever it truly is, its effects are very much evident upon those unfortunate enough to fall victim to it. To begin, a person walking alone at night will be stalked by an unknown individual. This person, watching in the darkest corners, will be emaciated, sickly, and bedraggled. Upon the watcher's face will be a painfully wide smile that will not reach their eyes. This smile will have been held for so long that the muscles within the face will have atrophied, fusing the expression in place. The watcher will slowly attempt to close the distance between itself and the unwary victim until they are within arm's reach. At this point, it doesn't matter if the victim notices or not, as the watcher only needs to make skin-to-skin contact for the process to begin. Once the watcher touches the victim, an odd thing occurs. The watcher, though still with the perpetual smile, will typically fall to the floor in retching sobs, while the victim will begin to smile as they walk away from their attacker. This is known as the transference event. You see, there are a few things happening with the Llyncu that simple observation does not illuminate. Often placed within the same category as the Dylan Weir, the Llyncu could be described as an incompatible alien thought. This thought is transferred via touch from one victim to the next. However, even then there is more complexity to this situation. Typically, when it comes to the Eldritch Sphere, the human mind is so incapable of comprehending what they are seeing that it destroys their psyche. However, with the Llyncu, while the thought is destructive, it is escapable, which is the problem. Those inhabited by a Llyncu retreat into their own minds, creating for themselves an entire world. We believe that this reaction is only possible due to the Llyncu, as the world that is created is just as detailed and complex as our own real world. These false realities will have thousands, if not millions of years of history, with each inhabitant being as real to the victim as anyone they were to meet within real life. The big issue is that these invented worlds appear to revolve around the victim in subtle ways. While those interviewed after the fact all say that they faced hardships and conflict within their created realities, they always eventually triumphed over these issues. This creates a world where the person's life is almost perfect, where they build relationships, build upon themselves, and become fully self-actualized. And then it is all ripped violently away. When the Llyncu transfers to the next person, they are left with the cold realization that all they experienced was untrue and none of it mattered. Along with this, their bodies now no longer reflect how they have grown to see themselves, being either years or decades older, worn, unnaturally thin, and typically racked with disease. This plunge back to cold reality in many cases is too much for the victims, the extreme cognitive dissonance causing violent seizures that will quickly bring about their end. This is very much time dependent, as some will only be inhabited for a year or less, while others will be inhabited for decades. The length of time changes the severity of the reaction to reality for the victim, with those who have only been inhabited for a year or so only suffering deep depression rather than death. The effect is somewhat similar to withdrawal, with the symptoms being more severe the longer the victim was within their constructed reality. Even those who are only within their fantasy world for days instead of years describe an intense feeling of loss once returned to reality that never fully leaves them. This is the great evil of the Llyncu. It makes living within the true, authentic world unbearably painful for its victims. While the Llyncu is inhabiting the body of its victim, its behavior is almost animal in nature, sleeping outside, eating whatever is available, and avoiding any contact until it is ready to move on. This is why, when the victim awakens, they feel such a disconnect with their own form, as they will look utterly unrecognizable both from how they looked before inhabitation and how they looked within their fantasy reality. We do not believe that the Llyncu itself is a thinking being. The behaviors exhibited by those inhabited are simply the most primitive instincts of man taking over while the conscious mind has retreated into their own world. This is why most do not think of the Llyncu as its own entity, and instead as an effect similar to the fire shot forth from a dragon or the magics performed by a hag. Interestingly, the perpetual smile that those inhabited by a Llyncu wears is actually thought to be the result of the victim themselves instead of being a direct result of the Llyncu. The idea is that the smile is an unconscious reaction to the completely fulfilled life that the victim experiences within their fabricated world. The reason the smile remains after the Llyncu leaves is simply due to the muscles having fused into said position after having been held in such a way for so long. Now, you may fairly be thinking that since the entity that created the Llyncu is now gone, that it's only a matter of time before they are all removed from our world. However, sadly, there is an issue to this. In around 20% of cases, when a Llyncu goes to transfer to a new victim, instead a second instance is created, leaving both the original victim and the new victim inhabited. While you may assume that two instances of people inhabited by a Llyncu would band together, this is not actually the case, as they appear solitary, most likely not to compete for resources, be it food, somewhere to sleep, or people to infect. When dealing with a Llyncu, there are three options available to hunters. The first, and by far simplest, is to take down the affected person via range. This is definitely the safest approach, if not the most ethical. It should only be done if the victim has been inhabited so long that there is no hope of recovery and they are an imminent threat to others. The second approach involves the capture of infected individuals. This is extremely dangerous both to the hunters and the inhabited victim, though the danger to the hunter can be mitigated via the use of an MMB to protect yourself from inhabitation. Once captured while avoiding skin contact, the target can be moved to an isolation chamber where food and shelter will be provided, allowing the victim to live out the rest of their life within the fantasy world that they have created. This approach is done when an inhabited individual has been infected too long to be saved, but are not currently a threat to others. Finally is the option to attempt to save these poor unfortunates. This requires the use of an MMB linked with the hunter. The hunter will then attempt to make skin contact with the victim, drawing the Llyncu into the MMB. Once this is done, both MMB and Llyncu can be destroyed together. This should only be attempted when the victim has been inhabited for less than a year. Any longer and the shock of returning to the real world will be too much for their psyche to bear. Even if within the window of time, the victim will have a long and arduous recovery and will never fully return to how they were before inhabitation, the loss is simply too great. Whether or not you view the subjective reality these victims exist within as real or not, you should understand the gravity of what is being taken from them when their minds return to our world. You can obviously argue that due to it being within their heads, it is inauthentic and thus a pointless existence, but to them it was real, and with our intervention we rip it away. This is a tremendous responsibility that all hunters that take on a Llyncu bear, whether or not to wake someone from a beautiful dream and return them to the imperfect world in which they are one small part. There are those hunters that refuse to take on contracts related to a Llyncu due to the weight of the decision that is placed upon them, and quite frankly, I cannot blame them. But that will be all for today. With Arthur's might and Merlin's wisdom. Thank you.